All statements and opinions expressed by guests of the Adult in the Room podcast are strictly their own and do not necessarily reflect the beliefs or opinions of the host, producers, or advertisers. All interviews are presented in their most complete possible form in the interests of free speech. No statements should be interpreted as financial, legal, or medical advice. Listener and viewer discretion are strongly advised.
It's the Adult in the Room podcast with Victoria Taft. That's me. Welcome to the Adult in the Room podcast with Victoria Taft. Lee Smith is a thinker. He's an author. He's a former Village Voice and Weekly Standard writer, and a man who can see clearly what's going on in the geopolitical space, especially on the U.S. political battlefield. He was ahead of the curve in seeing the Russia collusion intelligence operation and political operation against President Trump, and that resulted in this book, The Plot Against the President, the true story of how Congressman Devin Nunes uncovered the biggest political scandal in U.S. history. And that book shocked the conscience of all decent, law-abiding Americans who were paying attention. And that led to another book, The Permanent Coup. And now his latest is Disappearing the President, Trump, Truth Social, and the Fight for the Republic. Lee Smith, welcome to the Adult in the Room podcast. How are you today?
Victoria, I'm very well, and thank you so much for inviting me on. It's a real pleasure to be speaking with you and your great audience.
Thank you. Now, what do you mean by disappearing the president? What is that, and what does Truth Social have to do with that?
Well, this is a term that, that really comes from what was going on in the 70s and 80s with Latin American security services, which is how they tried to get rid of the opposition. This was the action called disappearing them. And of course, there's a Spanish phrase for that. It went on, especially most notoriously in Argentina. And this is a large part of what's been going on here to the leader of the American opposition. And that's Donald Trump, the different efforts. And this book is really, it's encyclopedic and quite comprehensive. Because, of course, let's go back to Russiagate, but it brings us up to the very present. You see the cover of the book where Donald Trump gets up at the Butler, Pennsylvania rally. There you are, after he's been shot in the face. Fight. So this is really, again, it's the comprehensive account of the anti-Trump operation that we've seen over the last 8 years.
It's amazing. It's frightening, actually. And it comes out October 29th. I've pre-ordered my copy, and you can pre-order yours. And I'm glad it's encyclopedic because it's good. For example, this is an interesting thing that Elon Musk amplified on the X.com social media platform the other day. And it's all of the lawfare into Elon Musk. Now, you say to yourself, well, the only reason that they're doing this is because he's supporting Trump, obviously. And so has the free speech. So all of these things, it'd be nice to have such a thing with regard to President Trump. And it sounds like this book may be that thing.
Well, I mean, I think it's very important to see. I mean, Elon Musk has been hugely helpful. I think it's very important to see. I describe Donald Trump here as the free world's leading dissident, right? And he's really the guy who stood for freedom of speech, because this started, with January 6th in 2021. They threw Trump off of all the social media platforms. They threw him off of Twitter. They threw him off of Facebook. And this is really the crucible from which Truth Social arises. And Donald Trump describes it in this book. He said, "It's my voice, Truth Social." So you hear a lot of people saying, well, is he going to sell his stock? Is he going to do this? Is he going to do that? Like, no, as he's pointed out and as he makes clear in this book, the point is not to make money, right? They're very happy over at Truth Social with the amount of money they've made. And Donald Trump is now astonishingly a tech startup billionaire. Right. Among other achievements, he's a tech startup billionaire with Truth Social. But the important thing is, this is his voice. This is the backstop, right? Without social, even though that the president has gone back a lot on used Twitter as another vehicle. for getting his message out. Truth Social is really the backstop. So that's why that's so important. And that's why that's in the subtitle. But again, you talk about Elon Musk's support for free speech and Donald Trump. It's very important that these two things be seen together, because who are the people who have been targeted? Who are the people who have been censored, right, over the last, I think we have to look over the last 6 or 7 years, that censorship is really kicked in. Surveillance first, then censorship is really kicked in. And you see that these two things, it's not just they intersect, or they're not just parallel. It's the same thing. The people who are targeted, right, the people who are censored are people who are on the either Donald Trump himself or people on the on his side of the political spectrum.
When did this all start happening? The shadowing, shadow banning, and all of this stuff, this information op run against the United States citizens.
Well, the surveillance starts before, and I show here that William Barr actually is the grand architect of the surveillance state. This goes back to the 1990s, a program that Barr and Robert Mueller were working on. It's a mass surveillance program. It goes back to 1992. And so what I describe about William Barr here is very important for people to understand who Barr was, what his aims were, and they were not healthy. They were not good for the republic. But the other component, I believe, that you're talking about, the censorship component, I tie that to when Barack Obama pulled Mark Zuckerberg aside at a conference in Lima, Peru, about 10 days after the 2016 election, when he read him out for basically for not censoring Donald Trump on Facebook. And so that's really where the censorship component of this large, ongoing, comprehensive campaign begins, right? So again, it's multi-pronged. We see the surveillance aspect. We see the censorship aspect. There's also political violence is very important part of the ongoing anti-Trump operation. But the censorship really starts again. It really starts 2016, November 2016, when Obama reads out Zuckerberg, right? I mean, one of the reasons that Trump won in 2016 is because he found out how to use Facebook to his advantage, and as they should, the Facebook executives, they were keen to see someone else be able to use social media the way that Barack Obama had in 2008 and 2012. And so when Donald Trump showed interest and initiative, they were keen to help. And of course, this was anathema to Barack Obama. So that's when Obama, who had big tech in his corner, that's one of the things he did through his administration. As I show in Disappearing the President, he really absorbed big tech. So that's really when censorship stuff started in November 2016.
Let's go back to Bill.
Right after Trump's victory.
You know, I will let's just camp there for a second. The Antifa, BLM stuff, especially Antifa, was happening in Portland before the election. They were going after people of Trump supporters, right? And Proud Boys were there too. I can remember in Portland, seeing videos, and I still have friends there and such. So I was getting some inside details about this. And who did all that? Who spun all this up? Was this just organic, or was it paid?
Well, no, the political violence also starts with Barack Obama. One of the important things about this book here is it's not just an encyclopedic account of the anti-Trump operation. It also says who's behind it, and it's Barack Obama, right? I mean, Donald Trump said as much in March 2017 when he tweeted, remember how upset people were? How dare he? He said, Obama had my wiretap me at Trump Tower. Now, the language was not exactly what happened, but as we now know, yes, Barack Obama's spy services had Donald Trump and the Trump campaign under surveillance. But here's what Russiagate did. What people really need to understand is, by legitimizing this campaign trick, calling Donald Trump a Russian spy, which is what Obama did. Remember in 2017 when he took control of Russiagate after the election, by legitimizing that, by saying that Donald Trump had been helped to office by Vladimir Putin, Barack Obama split the country, right? He not only undermined Trump's presidency, he split the country. The loyal Americans are people who voted for Hillary Clinton. The other people voted for a traitor, right? That split the country. That's what started. This country has seen political violence before, assassinations, riots, things like that. But this is what actually divided the country. So again, it's important to see Barack Obama's hand in this. He was the one who told John Brennan to institutionalize and make official the preposterous idea that Donald Trump won the White House in 2016 because of Vladimir Putin. By institutionalizing that and by credentialing this conspiracy theory, it was Barack Obama who set us on course for the political violence that we saw in the wake of the 2016 election and the run-up to the 2020 election, and now in the run-up to the 2024 election as well. And as I also show, there are many scenarios that have been proposed by the left showing that there will be plenty of post-election violence this year too.
In what form would that take, do you think?
Well, I mean,
Street brawls?
Yes. I mean, look, people have said, well, does it matter if these are blue cities? Well, it matters if it's Washington, D.C.
Right. That
so
happens.
that's very important. And yeah, there are different scenarios that have been proposed by left-wing activists, people who proposed similar scenarios in 2020, which actually, it turns out they weren't scenarios. It was planning for what would happen. Right. And this is what's going on in 2024 as well. The same people are proposing scenarios, and it looks like they've set a course for post-election violence. And one of the interesting things is most of the scenarios that they've proposed, at least publicly so far, assume a Trump victory. Right. So it assumes a Trump victory, and what it assumes is it assumes massive violence. It assumes that Trump will try to impose the Insurrection Act. There will be division in the military ranks, and so that's that's the other problem. It's not just violence in the cities. It's like if there is division in the U.S. military, that's a very big problem for the country, right?
Jamie Raskin has already promised that there will be a 14th Amendment defense, or I guess complaint rather, against Donald Trump, in that he had something to do with January 6, 2021 and all that. And he plans to stop the vote on January 6th or something akin to that, at least halt it, make a problem, force a problem.
Well, yeah. What he said is it's Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which has to do with insurrection. Of course, this was after the Civil War. This is all ridiculous, and this is what the Supreme Court threw out when Colorado tried to keep Trump off the ballot. So it's preposterous. But Raskin's whole idea is that, like, yeah, we're not gonna, we're not going to allow this. We're not going to allow Trump to be seated as president of the United States because he's an insurrectionist. And then Raskin has violence baked into the system. He's like, then of course Trump supporters will go crazy, and we'll all need security, and that's when civil war mode kicks in. I mean, these are his exact words. So yeah, these guys are it's not that they're anticipating violence; they are looking to incite. They're looking to provoke violence.
Okay, so that takes us to 2021, January 6, 2021. You're saying, I saw Antifa and BLM doing this in the 2016 election. And then we have, of course, they did that all the way up. They attacked people coming out of a Trump event, burned up cars, burnt the church. I'll never forgive the pastor. Well, I will, but she's horrible that she came out and she was more offended that Donald Trump held up a Bible in her church, from her church, than she was that her church had been burned up. These people are nuts. So then we have January 6th. How much of that was organic? How much of that was planned? Because we know there were a lot of feds there.
Well, this is one of the things that I was talking about before when I said the people who have 2024 scenarios, the same people who cooked up 2020 scenarios, they were talking about this. They were talking about things like this beforehand. So there was lots of preparation for January 6th. I don't know if they knew it was going to be January 6th or something else. but they were certainly prepared, and they were looking to insinuate themselves into these protests and cause trouble. I have a very nice interview with friend and colleague Julie Kelly, of course, whose work on January 6th is so important. So yeah, this was, they baked this into the system. It was the Transition Integrity Project in 2020, led by Rosa Brooks, and now for 2024, she's heading something called Democracy's Future Project, and these are the scenarios that I'm talking about. So you can bet right now that there are different people who are planning on stoking violence. Certainly after the election, we'll see what happens election day.
I mean, you were a man of the left, if I'm not mistaken, for a very, very long time, and then you went to the Weekly Standard, that sort of thing. So did you ever think for 1 minute that your life, your later years here, would be spent talking about government corruption?
Yeah, I mean, what
because that's what this is, right?
Yeah. One of the things I tried to explain with Plot Against the President. One of the things that I tried to explain with Plot Against the President when we first saw this happen. I mean, I'm sure most of your viewers have seen Serpico, right? So the idea that somehow that law enforcement officials, that there's corruption in law enforcement should hardly come as any surprise. But we saw what a lot of people said in 2016. But after Russiagate, after elements of Russiagate started to come out, oh no, the FBI, DOJ, these guys are totally on the level. It's like, how is it possible that no one's ever heard the phrase "dirty" cops before, right?
Yeah.
Why is this so surprising?
Right.
So, no, the idea
that used to be the leftist province. Now it's.
Well, I mean, I know everyone is aware of it. I mean, people on the right are aware of it as well. But you saw both people on the right and the left. There was the Never Trump right, and there was all of the left that said, "How dare you insult our FBI?" You know, so we learned some important things with that. And one of the things that we learned with that is that, in fact, the left, for the most part, was never really interested in those things. What they wanted to do, and as I explained here in Disappearing the President, is that the point of all these things, like the Church Committee, was to turn it around and get government bureaucracies on the side of the left. What they didn't like was they don't care about free speech. They don't care about the FBI or DOJ targeting people. They themselves didn't want to be targeted. If they can use these instruments to target their opponents, that's fine. There's no problem with it. So anyway, to sort of answer your question, no, I'm not surprised that there's corruption in Washington, D.C., whether we're on the left or on the right. I mean, and it's human nature. And again, a lot of American culture is devoted to this. How many Westerns are about the, corrupt sheriffs, right? I mean, virtually everyone has a corrupt has a corrupt lawman, a marshal, or a sheriff. So again, the idea that we're waking up in 2017 to find out that here's what James Comey at the FBI did, here's what John Brennan at the CIA did, should not come as a surprise. What's surprising is when people turn around and defend this, these insane abuses.
Does the Bill Barr, Robert Mueller thing, where they turn the government, the whole force of the intelligence community on the U.S. citizens, is that the Patriot Act, or what is that from 1992?
No, this is before the Patriot Act. This is 1992,
right? Okay.
So one of the cases that I make here is that 9/11 was, I mean, in some ways, 9/11 was simply another instrument, right? If you look at what happened, how the FBI especially turned an enormous failure into basically a way to collect more money and more power in Washington, D.C. It's staggering. And the same thing, as I point out, happened with January 6th. I interview an FBI whistleblower, a gentleman you may have heard of, Stephen Friend, great guy. But one of the things that Steve points out is that, well, they've used this. They've used January 6th to increase their budgets. They're all getting promotions and raises because their big thing now is white nationalism or domestic terrorism. And you see how they've handled these cases, and it's absolutely insane. So this is what the FBI does. Partly this has to do with the fact that there are some bad people who go into law enforcement. That's one. The other problem is it's a Washington, D.C. bureaucracy, and bureaucrats are what they are. Everyone who's been to the DMV knows what bureaucrats are like, and that's what we're dealing with in lots of cases here.
Are there any heroes here? I mean, Stephen Friend, maybe Kyle Seraphin from the FBI, and but that's it. I mean, they gave up their jobs basically. They've been put on ice.
Well, if you talk to them, you find out what they say. They say, well, no, unfortunately, a lot of the people at the Bureau are not, not quiet superheroes. They're people who are, putting their time in and, and making their money. And it's not like when things go bad that they're going to jump to the side of good. They're not, right? We've seen what's happened. We've seen how they, how they pull out their guns on families to arrest godly men who are praying at abortion clinics. So, no, I'm afraid to say that in large part these guys are not on the side of the Republic.
What are your recommendations then for
not on our side?
Yeah, they don't seem to be on right-thinking Americans' sides anymore. The prescription is what?
Well, prescription for what? There's a number of different things going on.
For example, in the 70s, after Watergate and after the Pentagon Papers and all that stuff, we had the Church Commission.
Well, look, my answer is this. Well, the Church Commission, as I explained here, is garbage, right? People wanted to talk about the Church Commission. The Church Commission was, Frank Church was a leftist nut, and so that's what the Church Commission gave us some of the problems we have now, like FISA, right, which was used to spy against the Trump campaign in 2016. So no. And whenever I hear people talk about, look, God bless them, people who want to fight the deep state, great. But you know what? There is no victory in fighting the deep state, right? That is not a recipe for success. It's a commitment to an unwinnable and endless war, right? The idea is, we're going to hire 1,000 lawyers to move paper around, to fire 10,000 bureaucrats. That's losing, right? That's how you lose. So what I explain to people and why I point and why I show in this book that the person who's been running the anti-Trump campaign is Barack Obama and Barack Obama's shadow network, right? This is how prosecutors work. This is how the left work, right? It's not, the left doesn't say, let's go after everyone on the right that we can think of. What have they done the last 8 years? They've gone after Donald Trump, right? They went after Roger Stone. When they went after Michael Flynn, it was for the purpose of targeting Donald Trump, right? When they went after Rudolph Giuliani, why? It was to go after Donald Trump. So the case I make here is that we should absolutely narrow our focus, look at how the power is actually aligned. Who are the people in power? Where does the money come from? For what, and on behalf of what causes and whose interests? So that's the way forward. Not to say, we're going to go in there and we're going to unravel the deep state. No, you're not, right? And remember, they're bureaucrats, right? These people don't leave their seats without a piece of paper, right? So, when we talk about the deep state in Turkey, we're talking about very hard men with daggers between their teeth. When we're talking about the Americans, we're talking about people who exchange craft beer tips, right? Very, very different kind of people, right? They're bureaucrats. If you go after the leadership, they fall in line. They might hate Donald Trump. They might actually be communists, but they're also bureaucrats. They're primarily bureaucrats. If you go after their leaders and show them you're serious, that people are going to lose their jobs and go to jail. Most importantly, that people will go to jail. They'll fall in line very quickly. So that's the way forward. It's not very complicated. It's very simple. Again, this is what prosecutors do. Mob prosecutions, what do? They have these big pyramids. Who's on top? Who's in the bottom? How do we get this guy to get that guy? That's the way forward. Not let's go fight the FBI. Let's go take away the CIA's budget for ABC. It's like, no, that's a waste of time, right? I mean, because if you knock one block out, there's going to be something else to replace it. What you have to do is you have to find a way to turn all of those all of those wannabe lions into lambs. That's by going after leadership.
What's Barack Obama's angle here? Why doesn't he just go away like all the other former presidents do?
Well, that's precisely the point. That's exactly the point. Barack Obama is, as one of his biographers has said, he is not normal, right? And of course, you see that we all know this is normal, but we've been told, oh no, you can't talk about that. It sounds paranoid or it sounds racist. There's even Republicans who say that. No, you can't. No, don't talk about Obama. That sounds racist. But look, he's the only president who's ever stayed in Washington, D.C. after his term. The only other one was Woodrow Wilson, who had a stroke. Wilson was incapacitated his last 18 months in office. He stayed in Washington because he couldn't be moved. That's why he stayed. Barack Obama is the only president who has ever stayed. Why? Because they didn't want to give the interference that executive authority was not peacefully transferred. So they all left. They all said, I'm out of here. I'm going to pursue my charities, my philanthropy, whatever it is. I'm going to read. I'm going to play golf. Not Barack Obama. Exactly. Barack Obama is still there because Barack Obama has been running a shadow White House since 2016, and he still is. As I explain right here, all of this nonsense that came out when Harris was, when Harris replaced Biden, it's absolutely garbage. This was all Barack Obama's call. Barack Obama made her vice president. Barack Obama wanted her to be the president in 2020, right? That was Barack Obama. So the idea that somehow this is all mysterious, what happened, internal coup, this and that, no, this was Barack Obama, right? Even Barack Obama's aide said so. So the case I make here is it's time when Barack Obama waves his hand regularly and says, it's me. And when his aides say, it's Barack, it's time to say, okay, I guess it's Barack Obama who's running the show here.
How is he being funded?
How is he being funded? I mean, there's all sorts
I
of...
know he's got money, but...
There's all sorts of people who are around him. There's sorts of people whose interests are being pursued here. I mean, most of the names are well known, whether we're talking about George Soros or a number of big tech people. I mean, are you talking about how he personally is being funded?
No, I know he's made enough money over and over again. What I'm saying is, in order to fulfill his goals, which is to upend whatever Donald Trump is doing, and or any number of other things, Iran comes to mind. Who's funding this? You mentioned in a recent tablet story you did, which is where you write, that there were the folks who were out there on the college campuses in favor of the Gazans, in favor of Hamas. I mean, that didn't happen organically, you argue. Are these the same people?
No, it's all the left, right? This is all left-wing money. There are different people who are saying, it comes from Iran. No, it doesn't come from Iran. It comes from the different Americans who've been supporting progressive causes all the time. It comes from who we think it comes from. It comes from George Soros. It comes from, it comes from Pierre Omidyar. All of these networks that everyone knows their names. I mean, so I name them. I identify them. There's no surprises. It's just that people don't want to say it. People will not say what's going on here. Here's the money. Here are the lawyers. Here are the interests. Here are the causes. Who's on the top of this pyramid? Well, it's the guy who keeps saying, I'm at the top of the pyramid.
Yeah. Why? I mean, what is he trying to achieve? There's something bigger than I hate Donald Trump.
No, of course. I mean, no, he talked about transforming the United States of America, and that's certainly the project. That's what they want to do. Transform the United States of America. We all know plenty of people who don't like the United States of America who are Americans. Most of them are on college campuses. As it turns out, one was elected to be president of the United States 2 times, in 2008 and 2012. That's what it is. They don't like the country the way it is now.
And I don't like the way the country is the way it is now, with censorship of social media, censorship, just making regular, normalizing censorship. I mean, when you've got the likes of the president-to-be, possibly, and her vice president talking about the fact that that First Amendment really doesn't mean what you think it means. I mean, that's frightening to me.
Well, remember, 2019, Kamala Harris is one of the first people to urge that Trump, then the president, should be thrown off of social media. So, yeah, they're all, again, this is what I'm talking about. Free speech is not important. It's not a principle for them. It's not a value. It's not a virtue. They want to be able to speak and shut everyone else up.
Lee Smith.
Primarily Donald Trump.
Yeah. A populist. I think that's sort of the operational phrase there instead of a tyranny. Thank you so much for coming on, Lee Smith. I appreciate it. The book is coming out in October 29th.
October 29th. Yes.
Disappearing the President is the name. Get it? I've already pre-ordered. What are you waiting for? Thanks again. Appreciate it. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Adult in the Room podcast. To keep the programs you like to listen to, please rate this podcast with a fantastic 5 stars on your Apple Podcast app every time you listen. And give me a great review. Plus, of course, subscribe to the podcast. It makes a difference with the big tech algorithm and the big tech oligarchs, and it makes us easier to find. Please get in touch with me on all the big tech stuff. Yeah, we're still there. Using the names Victoria Taft or the Adult in the Room podcast on MeWe, Parler, Minds, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks to 1ACast for imaging, editing, and production. The fantastic song is Gospel by the March 4th Band of Portland, Oregon. Music for Antifa versus Mike Strickland is Ride or Die by Raps by RC. The Adult in the Room podcast is also a production of Flamingo Road Studios. Remember, head up, heart out, and strive to be the adult in the room. Till next time, mischief managed.